Hello and welcome to Business Lessons from the Military. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we are here every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with an hour in for Mountain and Central. And my voice may sound a little bit lower than normal. I spent almost the entire day yesterday talking, and my voice hasn't quite come back yet. But here I am, Business Lessons from the Military with my USS Ronald Reagan mug. See that? And there's her battle flag, CVN 76, and ready to talk about intelligence, the spy versus spy kind, how we can use that part of Marine Corps warfighting doctrine to advance our professional lives. So we in this show we talk about military doctrine, history, the leadership attributes and philosophies of great military people, all by way of figuring out how can we apply this to running our businesses or to helping another business run that we're working for more efficiently, more intelligently. That's what we're talking about the last few weeks, and so on. So like the hopefully good military man that I am, I have my PowerPoint, because you don't do things like this in the military without a PowerPoint, of course. And here we are. This has been a somewhat lengthy presentation that we've been working on over the last, I think, about 5 or 6 weeks. So everything we do, of course, on the Way to Wow shows relates to this graphic, the 3 pillars of attainment. And we operate primarily in the finances realm of the pursuits pillar. But of course, our self and our relationships always impact our pursuits, indeed our finances and our work. So sometimes we delve into those pillars and realms as well. So we started out talking about the objective of intelligence. We defined it, and then we talked about the inherent challenge of intelligence and how to deal with that. Okay. And then we talked about the characteristics of good intelligence, and then the classes of intelligence. Okay. And today, so if you're interested if you missed any of those shows, please go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@the-way-to-wow, and you can see all of those previous episodes, along with episodes of our other shows. We've been doing Way to Wow shows now for, almost 4 years, 3.5 years, I think. So we have a lot of great topics there for you that will help you figure out what does success mean and how to gain that success, both financially as well as in our lives more generally. So today we're going to talk about 3 topics: levels of intelligence, intelligence requirements, and then finally sources of intelligence. So excuse me, talking about the levels of intelligence. Now, if going back to earlier discussions of Marine Corps warfighting doctrine, one of the original concepts we dealt with is the levels at which warfare takes place. And you see those here on the screen. So tactical, operational, and strategic. Okay, so when we talk about the tactical level, and I'm going to talk from a warfare standpoint first, and then we'll translate this into the business world. So the tactical level is typically where small units are actually going out, they're pursuing a limited objective. It may be to take a particular hill. That's sort of the classic one. But in any event, it's typically happening at maybe the rifle team or the platoon or perhaps the company level. Okay, this is activities in the field and how the tactics they're using to achieve whatever limited objective they've been given. Operational then is the next level up. So at the operational level, we're talking about coordinating probably multiple small units so that operationally their tactical activities are helping us achieve the larger objective that we seek in that particular battle. Okay, so think about tactical as a limited limited activity to achieve a very small objective. Operational is the coordination of several small tactical operations to achieve a battle-wide objective, okay? And then the next level up then is strategic. So at the strategic level, we're looking at planning and executing battles in order to win the war, okay? So that just real briefly, I wanted to review that so you can understand these three levels. Now you and then understanding those levels then gives you an idea of the different types of intelligence that might be necessary in order for the particular units to be able to achieve their objectives. So what a platoon or a rifle team needs to achieve its tactical objectives is going to be very different than what the general of an army needs in order to determine and achieve the strategic objectives of winning the war. Now, it's not that knowing the strategic objectives will not benefit the tactical unit leaders. It probably will, because they'll have a sense of how they fit into the larger picture. Okay, and same with the operational. However, at the strategic level, generally speaking, no pun intended, doesn't need to be aware of the tactics that a small unit commander is using in order to achieve his objective. Okay, and probably, by the way, should not be involved with them. He shouldn't be micromanaging his people that way. Okay, so as we look at this then from an intelligence standpoint, translated to the business world, okay? So just this morning, I read an article about Shari Redstone, who is the CEO of a company called National Amusements. Now, many of you may have never heard of National Amusements, but you probably have heard about one of the most important assets it owns, Paramount Studios. And you've probably heard of Paramount Plus and Showtime and BET Network and CBS Television Network. These are all assets that are owned by National Amusements, or at least partly owned by National Amusements. So the article was discussing the article was talking about that Shari Redstone is trying to decide whether she's going to sell her interest in National Amusements and sort of get out of the media business and focus on other things, non-media projects and her family, or whether she's going to keep at it. Okay, so in order for her to make that decision, presumably she has gained intelligence, information about the overall media industry, okay? And not just her own company, not just Paramount and Showtime, etc. So in order for her to understand the difficulties that she faces, okay, and the article discussed some of them. For example, National Amusements is heavily involved in cable television, in providing content to cable companies, okay, Showtime, BET, etc. Okay, the traditional cable business is in what's called structural decline, meaning it's not failing because of bad shows or something like that. It's declining in importance because viewers are leaving cable in order to go to streaming services, in order to watch videos on YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a shift away from cable, and they're not going to come back. That's the bottom line. So whether it takes 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years, I can't say. But over the long haul, cable is going to continue to decline. Okay. In the same way that landline phones started to decline with the advent of cell phones and has accelerated over the years to the point where you see, for example, you don't see payphones anymore. Okay. So as she looks at, for example, the structural decline of cable, and as she looks at the challenges of making streaming profitable, okay, she needs intelligence at the strategic level in order to make those decisions and figure that out. Okay, so how a particular show needs to be launched, I mean, it's not that it's completely irrelevant, but in terms of making these high level decisions, tactical intelligence isn't particularly helpful for her. Okay. She needs to look at the bigger picture, right? So, for example, she needs intelligence about what is the Disney company doing in order to make their streaming services financially profitable. Okay. Disney has lost billions of dollars over the last several years between Disney Plus and ESPN Plus and all these other things. They have not been able to crack the code either on how to make streaming profitable. In fact, only Netflix is profitably streaming. Okay, all the other big players are not yet. They've lost. I don't remember what the figure is, but it's in the tens of billions of dollars, I think, since launching these various services, trying to figure out how to make money through streaming. Okay, so Shari Redstone needs to she needs to gather strategic intelligence in order to make those high level decisions. Now, depending on what decisions she makes, then operationally that will require a different kind of intelligence in terms of making the decisions about how to execute on that strategic vision. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, or not for the sake of argument, for the sake of illustration, that she decides to keep national amusements and sort of dedicate herself to figuring out how to make these various media assets work. Okay, so next she needs to, how do I deal with the structural decline of cable? What do I do there? Is cable going to become something else? Am I just going to have to live with the fact that in maybe 10 to 20 years, it's not going to be generating any kind of cash flow or profits anymore? How do I do that? And again, at that point, she'll want to gather intelligence. First of all, what are other cable content providers doing? What are the cable companies themselves doing? Okay, like for example, many of the cable companies have gotten into providing broadband broadband internet access, right? And so even though cable TV as a business is in structural decline, they may be doing okay because as people engage in more streaming, they need ever more robust broadband. And so while, cable is going like this, broadband is going like this, and so on, in some ways they're kind of, evening each other out, and the cable companies can stay profitable overall. Okay, so she needs to gather intelligence then at that operational level, okay, in order to decide how she's going to meet her strategic objectives. Now, Having said that, she may gather operational intelligence before she makes the strategic decision. So she may need to have a sense of what will we need to do, or what are the options for what we can do sort of battle-wise, operationally, if we decide on one strategy or another. Okay. And so typically, you'll want to consider knowing, or having the intelligence, I should say, available to you at least one level up or down from where you're operating. Now, someone in the middle in operations they're probably going to be concerned with both tactical and strategic intelligence, because both are going to impact them since they're in the middle. I talked about a minute ago, someone dealing at the operational level probably does not need to engage in tactical gathering, or evaluating tactical intelligence. Okay. On the other hand, now at this third level, tactical, right? So once the operational decisions have been made, then the people, the lieutenants, if you will, to use a military term, applying it to business, the lieutenants, then they have to actually take on pursuing that battle plan for the company. And so they're going to need to gather tactical intelligence on how best to, for example, let's look at streaming. So maybe streaming can be made more profitable, or can be made profitable, not more profitable because it's not profitable yet, but maybe streaming can be made profitable if better marketing decisions are made with regard to various shows. Okay. So how can the people at the tactical level do that? Well, again, they're going to need to gather intelligence. They may want to look at shows that have been streamed that have been very, very successful, right? There have been many streamed shows that have been very successful. It's just overall they haven't. Now, switching from Paramount to Disney for a minute, one of the decisions that Disney has made with respect to trying to get their streaming business profitable is they've decided that rather than doing just tons and tons of content, which costs a lot of money to produce, and much of which is not particularly successful and is not particularly good quality, they're going to refocus on quality, so make fewer shows of a higher quality that presumably then they can market more successfully and have a better chance of retaining streaming viewers, et cetera, et cetera. So that's operationally what they've decided to do. So then tactically, how do they do that? Okay, how do they decide which are the shows that are likely to be, result in a higher quality presentation? Okay, so is it focusing on particular writers? Is it focusing on particular genres? How do they do that? So what is it, and what does it mean for a show to be higher quality? Is that higher production values? Is that more well-known actors and actresses in the show? So what does all that mean? Okay, and so they'll need to gather intelligence at that operational and then down to the tactical level in order to make those decisions. Okay, and then to operationalize those decisions. Okay, so that's how levels of intelligence play into the decisions we make, in the business world. Now, you may say, well, that's obvious. That's just what we do. Yes, I would imagine so. However, I think it's good to think about these three categories so that we don't get lost. If we're working to make strategic decisions, we really don't want to get too wrapped up in tactical intelligence, because that could cloud the picture of strategically what we need to be deciding. Okay. So if as we get information in, we can sort it into these three categories, we can make a better decision at whatever level we're operating at, okay, without being overwhelmed by too much information, which is a big issue these days. Okay, so let's move on now to intelligence requirements. So here's the reality. We never have unlimited time to make decisions. Now, in some cases, we have more time than others, of course, but we never have unlimited time to make a decision. Okay. Talking about Shari Redstone again. So she's got to make this decision. And by the way, deciding not to do anything is a decision, right? It is. Okay. It's just it's a decision to just continue on as things have been going. However, in neither in the business world or on the battlefield, if we're not winning, to continue doing just what we're doing is almost inevitably the wrong decision. Okay, and that's the problem is Paramount's share price has dropped considerably, and investors are unhappy. Okay, so when we talk about intelligence requirements, what we mean is, what intelligence do we need in order to make the decision that needs to be made in the time frame that it needs to be made? Okay, and that will inevitably require, I should say, identifying intelligence gaps. What are we missing in order to be able to make this decision? Okay, so let's go back to the battlefield for a minute. Let's talk about on the tactical level. If you're a small group commander, you're commanding a platoon, okay, and you're told that you need to take that hill, okay, and one of the things you would really like to know is what is available to the people you're attacking to defend their positions. Do they have machine guns? Do they have artillery? Right? Pretty much, you may not necessarily care how much food they have or how much water, because that's more of a long-term thing. You're in the heat of the battle, or you're supposed to launch your attack in the next, whatever it is, hour or two. The most important, if you don't know what you're going to be facing in terms of the defender's ability to defend themselves, you're really at you're really at a disadvantage in terms of planning your attack and making it successful. Okay, so while there's lots of information you may want, what you really need is to know, what am I going to be faced, or what is my platoon going to be faced with when we launch our attack? Okay, and so those intelligence gaps need to be viewed through the lens of priority intelligence requirements. What is most important for me to know in the time I have available before I have to either make a decision or take action in order to make it most likely that I'll make a good decision, or I'll be successful in taking the action I need to take. Okay, so when we talk about intelligence requirements, summarizing this idea just real fast is breaking it down into priority intelligence requirements. This is what I really have to have in order to do whatever it is I need to do. Okay, and then let's say that you've got a week in order to make a decision. Okay, so if in the first 3 or 4 days you're actually able to get the priority intelligence requirements filled, right? So, but there's still going to be some other intelligence gaps. Okay, so then you might go down to your second level intelligence gaps and see if you can fill those, since you have the time to do that. Okay, you may even get down to your third level intelligence gaps, but you're probably not going to fill them all in the time required. And of course it depends, but oftentimes the tendency is to try and, cover as many of our bases as we can. And in doing so, we give up being thorough in understanding the most important issues. So generally speaking, we're better off focusing our resources on priority intelligence requirements and making sure we understand those as well as possible and we fill those as well as possible rather than broadening out. Okay? So we need to be careful in identifying the priority intelligence requirements among the multiplicity of intelligence gaps that we have. Okay, finally, sources of intelligence. So the key concept to understand about sources of intelligence is they need to be appropriate to the nature of intelligence requirements. Okay, so I'm going to take it to the battlefield first, and then we'll apply it to the business world. So one of the big open questions about what happened on October 7th in Israel, between Israel and Hamas, is how was Hamas able to launch this surprise attack? How could the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, not know that this was being planned and going to be executed, right? And there's a lot of speculation. Of course, there's a lot of hand-wringing and blaming going on. But it appears that at least one of the reasons is Hamas stayed very low tech in how they planned and executed this operation. So, for example, in knocking down the barricade between Gaza and Israel, they just got some bulldozers and went through when at the start of the battle. Okay, so they didn't get any kind of sophisticated munitions to blow it up or anything like that. Okay, at the same time, Israel was using a lot of very high-tech monitoring in order to know what was going on at that border. So you see there's I guess an imbalance, if you will. Israel's using high tech to try and figure out what's going on, and Hamas, probably on purpose, is staying low tech so that the high tech Israeli surveillance doesn't really yield them any information, right? So that created an intelligence gap, okay, that Hamas was able to take advantage of, okay, and it highlights that there were decisions made. If this is in fact turns out to be the case, then certain commanders made bad decisions in assuming that they could use high-tech surveillance in order to keep track on Hamas, and not even consider that there were ways to sort of hide what was going on from all this high-tech stuff. Okay, so now let's take this to the business world. Okay, there are lots of sources of intelligence in the business world. Okay, one of them is right here, Wall Street Journal, right? This is what we would call open source. Okay, so and by the way, here's the here's I don't know if you can see this, but here's the article, Redstone Ways Sail a Media Empire. That was the article I read that I was just using as an example. Okay, so open source intelligence is great. Okay, but let's say that I was interested in particular in talking with Shari Redstone about acquiring national amusements, right? So while open source intelligence is all good and well, it's not going to be sufficient for me to understand the dynamics of what's going on. So I would need to know. Now, the article mentions 2 or 3 companies and private equity groups that have had talks with her. one of the and by the way, I'm not going to be launching, I'm not going to be looking to buy National Amusements, but I'm just using this as an example. If I were, I would need to be connected into sources of information that could tell me as much as possible about the various negotiations or meetings that others have had to really understand the dynamics of what it would take in order to be able to buy National Amusements. Okay, so open source intelligence just wouldn't be sufficient. And if I don't understand what other bidders' interests are, how they propose to take National Amusements and use it and use it to their profit, then I could be overpaying for the company if I try to beat them out in a bidding war, or I might lose out to them because I don't understand the profit potential that National Amusements presents to them. And so, I'm not willing to bid as high a price as they might be able to bid. So as well, by understanding what they're thinking they're going to do with the company, okay, I might be able to, meet with Shari Renson and say, well, such and such a company, I understand you're having talks with them, and they're thinking that, they're going to buy it, and they're going to do this, and they're going to do that, and they're going to split up the company maybe and sell off pieces and all of that. And in the long run, I don't think that's going to work. Number one. Number two, it's a desecration of your legacy, or blah 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 blah, whatever it is. But having that non-open source intelligence, if you will, would put me in a much better position to form a strategy for acquiring National Amusements, and would also inform operationally and then down to tactically what I would need to do in order to make that goal happen. Okay, so those are the three concepts then: levels of intelligence, intelligence requirements, sources of intelligence. You can see they all work together fairly organically to help us understand what information do we need in order to make a good business decision. Okay, so gonna stop the sharing here. So that's our show for today, and we will be back a week from today with our final show on not only intelligence but on Marine Corps warfighting doctrine. So we've gotten through really the entire text. This is the book, and by the way, you can find a PDF of this online if you want to read in more depth about some of the concepts that we've spoken about over the last several months. So tomorrow at 10 a.m., that's our new time on Wednesdays, 10 a.m. Pacific, my guest will be William Elkins IV, and he's going to talk about how he went from being an Uber driver to having his own private car service. So I think you will really enjoy hearing William's story, and so I invite you to tune in again. New time, 10 a.m. Wednesday Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. All of our shows now are at 10 o'clock Monday through Wednesday, so we have an opportunity to be together at the same time each morning. Okay, next week on Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific will be the next edition of Trusts and Estates Weekly, and then, as I mentioned, we'll be back a week from today with our final show on Marine Corps warfighting doctrine. So I thank you very much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any thoughts, comments, please feel free to drop them in our social media. All the links will be in the show notes. You can always send me an email as well. My email address is in the show notes too. Always happy to hear from viewers and hear your thoughts, good and especially bad, how I can improve what we're doing and make it more useful for you. So I thank you again very much for watching. Wish you a wonderful rest of the day, and signing off. Marie, you are my bell. All the best, folks.